Oh, hello, YouTube. Today in the Naughty Librarian, we are going over Live and Let Die by Ian Fleming. This is James Bond Book 2, and I'm very excited to be doing this James Bond series. I am a huge James Bond nerd, and I'm just excited to make videos about it and like recapping the books. I am very excited. So let's get into Live and Let Die. So we're gonna start off with the yikes factor for a minute here. I'm just gonna say it bluntly. This book is absurdly racist. There's no better way to say it or no softer way to say it. It's just absurdly racist. Like they use the N-word in one of the chapter titles, for Pete's sake. Like, oh my God. And like, Live and Let Die came out in 1954. So if you think about what was going on in like the world during that era, like, they were just going off American history because most of this book happens in America. Like, schools were just integrated. And this was a year before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus. Like, this is pre-civil rights movement America. And a lot of the narrative feels like white fragility and paranoia. And the way that most of these characters are described, it's this almost, I don't know, animalistic or seeks to like cause a sense of like otherness in these people. And then you throw in the casual use of the N-word a lot, and it's all just a big yikes. Oh my God. So that all being said, there is a lot of problematic content in this book. Like, it's just very problematic. It's a problem. But it has other things going on too besides the, absurd racism. This also is super action-packed. I think it's one of the most action-packed of all of the James Bond books. And like, there are several action sequences in just this one story, and they've been spread over like 3 to 4 other movies. Like, there's so much going on in this book, they had to like space it out. And it has a lot of like good adventure story. It has like a good villain. I think the villain is particularly good. I think it's a good like spy thriller. But yikes, big yikes for racism here. And like, there's also, you know what, they're gonna double down on this. They're gonna throw in a dash of misogyny too, because like our heroine Solitaire is more so described as like an object to be won rather than like a person with thoughts and feelings. Like, James like invents a backstory for her without even asking her a question about her own backstory. You know what I mean? So very much being objectified in this book. Anyway, now that we have talked about the problems in the book, let's talk about what actually happens in Live and Let Die. So this is James's first like case back after the events of Casino Royale. And, he's had some medical attention to, fix his body, but he hasn't really had any psychiatric help to fix his mind. So he has a full mind set on revenge. He's just out for it. Whatever is related to, Smersh, he wants in on it. He wants to like beat up some like communists essentially. So his boss, M, he puts him on like a gold coin smuggling case. And it's linked to communist activity in America, and then through them back to Smersh in Russia. But here's the kicker though, these gold coins, they are literal pirate treasure. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. This is a pirate treasure gold smuggling ring. Yes, give this to me. I'm very excited about it. So the head suspect here is a guy named Mr. Big, and he's like this big time criminal, and he's the leader of like the Black Widow voodoo cult, which he's used to his advantage because he has made a lot of the followers of this cult believe him to be like the reincarnation or the zombie of Baron Samedi, who is like the voodoo god of like darkness and death. So like, hey, if people think you're the god of darkness and death, you're top dog. So he has used this to his advantage in preying on people's superstitions. And they suspect that Mr. Big is smuggling the coins out of Jamaica using his yacht that frequently makes trips between, Jamaica and St. Petersburg, Florida. And Bond's mission here is that he's going to go to America and he's going to assist the FBI and the CIA in tracking Mr. Big and finding the evidence that they need to prove that he's smuggling the coins. And once they have, the evidence, the operation will move back to Jamaica, which, by the way, in 1954 was still a British colony at the time, and James will be taking over the investigation from there because it's technically British soil. So James, he gets on a plane, he goes to New York. And he's gonna start looking for clues. And guess who his partner is on this adventure? Oh, it's his old bestie, Felix Leiter. And they are both so happy to be working together again. I love their friendship. So on that happy note, James is like, all right, like I'm ready to go. Like I'm pumped up. Like I'm gonna go back to my hotel. I'm gonna get ready. I have to pretend I'm an American, which he's like really put off by. he orders some breakfast. He's gonna get his day going. And the breakfast gets sent up to his room along with like a shoebox sized package. And James, he's just hungry. So he just gets down to scarfing up breakfast. And before he even like remembers like, I didn't order an extra package. That might be weird. And also it's ticking. So he's like, oh shit. And he leaps down behind his chair because, you know, he's had enough bombs go off around him to know one when he sees one. So he's like, oh, chair. And then it does go off because it's a bomb. But it's not really like a big explosive bomb. It's more like, I guess they modified like an elephant gun to like shoot off like a round or something. So it's like a small explosion, but it's like more like a big shot. And it was sent to James because Mr. Big, you know, he needs to send a message, but he needs to do it in the most dramatic way ever. And there's like a note in the box, and it's really a good note, actually. It says, the beats of your heart are numbered, and I've started counting. Like, that is some great supervillain shit. Like, that is an amazing line to stick with a bomb. But they can't sit here and dwell on like an explosion all day because the show's got to go on. So Felix comes to the hotel, he picks up James, and then they go all around like Harlem all day long, and they go to all these different clubs because they're trying to like get the lay of the land. And Felix is like a huge jazz nerd, so he knows all of the clubs because he used to go to them all the time and like listen to jazz. So he's having a ball going around to all these places he hasn't been to in a while, even though like he and James obviously very much stick out in Harlem. Like they're out of place, but they're having a good time, you know. They're going around all these clubs, and like last stop of the night is one of Mr. Big's nightclubs, so they can like try to spy on him essentially. So they get to the club and they're shown in, and they get put into this like very particular table, and they're like watching the dancers do their like sexy dances, and like the lights go out, and then the table that they're at just starts sinking into the floor with them along with it. So they're like, what is happening? And Felix and James, they get like grabbed and separated underground because basically the table sunk, the floor closed above them, and now they've been separated by like, you know, like hired goons. Like they've been drug apart. And James, he's taken to see Mr. Big. So how this goes down is that Mr. Big wants to find out if James was sent there to kill him because he knows James is an assassin. Like he's got his number here. He knows he's a 00. He knows he's an assassin. He's like, hey, listen, did your government send you here to kill me? And James is like, no, I didn't get sent here to kill you. So Mr. Big's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna bring out my interrogator to like fact check that. So he brings out his interrogator, who is a woman named Solitaire. And she's allegedly like telepathic, so she can read people's minds and like see the future a little bit. And she's like a prisoner of Mr. Big. Mr. Big found her and he's been keeping her. And so she meets James and she's like, this is an opportunity. So she just kind of like silently flirts with him by basically just like flashing her cleavage at him, like as a signal, like, hey, I'm gonna help you through titty power. Like that's how she's like signaling this to him. And James is like, cool, wherever this is going, like I'm cool with it. So that's where they are. And so Solitaire, she ends up backing up James's story that he was not here to kill Mr. Big. So Mr. Big is like, okay, cool, splendid. Well, I can't just like let you walk out of here because like you still showed up. So I'm gonna have one of my guys like break your finger. So they grab his finger and they like break it, but not like just a tiny little break, like they break the shit out of his finger. And then they're gonna let him go. And like, here's the message: get the hell out of America and out of my affairs. Bye-bye. Like that's what they're gonna do. So James is being like violently escorted out of the building by one of Mr. Big's henchmen called Teehee. And he's being, you know, drug out of the building. And James, he manages to like get the advantage, and he ends up like throwing Teehee down the stairs presumably killing him because like he falls down the stairs real bad and like is bleeding a lot. We're assuming he's dead. So James, he's like, all right, cool. And he takes Teehee's gun and he's like, okay, I'm gonna investigate. So he like wanders around a little bit and he like gets the lay of the land a little bit. And he's like, okay, I should get the hell out of here before they figure this shit out because they're gonna find that guy dead. So he makes it out to like the garage where they were gonna stick him in a car and dump him somewhere. So he gets to the garage, he hears the car running, and so he's like, okay, time to make a break for it. So like, he like bursts down the door and starts shooting, and he kills both of the men that were in the garage in like gruesome fashion. Like it is gruesomely described in this book, like how bad these guys get shot. Oh my word. But James is like, okay, cool, let's get this dead body out of the front seat. And just kind of throws it out and he gets in the car and he takes off. So James Bond has now stolen Mr. Big's car and killed 3 of his dudes. So James, he drives the car back for a little bit. He doesn't know where he is because he's not familiar with New York, and he starts figuring out where he is. He's like, okay, how do I get back to my hotel? So he drives like almost back to the hotel. He like leaves the car somewhere. And he goes and he gets back in, and then there's already a message for him from Felix telling him, you need to call me immediately, bro. So he calls Felix and he's super worried that like Felix got like seriously injured or something. They don't know what happened to each other. And like luckily for Felix, like he knows a lot about jazz, and he ended up making friends with like the henchman who was guarding him. So they just ended up like shooting the shit about jazz for a while, and they end up like being cool with each other. So like when the henchman gets told like, hey, go beat this guy up, he's like, oh shit, I don't really want to beat you up. Like, you're cool. So the guy just like, all right, fine. So he just knocks Felix out, and he drives him to the hospital and just like, hey, just tell everybody I beat you up real bad so like I don't get in trouble. And Felix is like, sure. So he got out of here just with like a bump on the head. However, you know, like I mentioned, James, he stole Mr. Big's car and he killed 3 of his guys. He has made a large mess, and both the FBI and the CIA are super pissed at him. They're like, do you know how much damage control we have to do now? Get the fuck out of New York, James. Like they're just like, just go. Like they're so mad at him. So Felix, he arranges like a train ticket for James to go down to St. Petersburg, and it's leaving later that day. So he just has to lay low for a little bit before he gets on the train. And James, he gets a phone call at his hotel, and he picks up, and it's Solitaire calling him from a drugstore, begging him to take her with him. And James is like, no, I'm not gonna take you with me. Are you insane? And she's like, listen, James, if you don't take me with you, I am going to full on kill myself. Like, are you trying to kill me? Because it will be your fault. Like, she's very dramatic about this. So James is like, all right, fucking fine, okay? Go to the train station. I'm taking this train. Tell him you're my wife, and like, I'll meet you there. So she's like, cool. And he doesn't know whether or not to trust Solitaire. Like, is this a big trap, or is she being legitimate with him? He doesn't really know. He's just like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to find out. So he doesn't really have like a good plan here. But like, you know, spoiler alert, Solitaire is legitimate. She managed to like escape like her watchmen, the people who were like guard her all the time for like a hot second so she could like sneak a phone call. So she's like actively trying to escape. So James, he waits for a little bit. He starts heading to the train station later. However, Mr. Big has a massive like web of informants all over the city, in other cities. Like if something's going down, Mr. Big knows about it. So like in the second like James leaves his hotel, he's immediately spotted. They immediately know where he's going. They know what train he's getting on. Like they know all of it. Like there's no hiding it. His cover's blown as shit. The only thing that they don't know, Solitaire was already on the train pretending to be his wife. She managed to get away with no one seeing her somehow. So James and Solitaire, they meet up on the train and like they talk for a little bit. And of course this ends with like sexy flirting and kissing and stuff. However, no sex because, you know, James, he's got a broken finger hand situation and it hurts too much to be able to bone properly. Like, for real though, that's some serious quitter talk, James. Like, you could totally have managed this. But anyway, James, he ends up rather liking Solitaire, even though he really doesn't spend much of any time actually getting to know her. He just kind of invents who she is in his mind. He's like, I bet she's like this, and like she grew up like that, and he never asks her about her life at all. He just like makes her up in his mind into this person that he likes a lot. And also, you know, James, he's a sucker for a damsel in distress, and like Solitaire is the biggest damsel in distress ever at the moment, so he feels also very protective of her, and he wants to like treat her right. So they're off. They're on the train, they're heading towards St. Petersburg, but the train porter, like, he literally risks his life doing this, but he manages to give James a warning, like, hey, there's some pretty dangerous dudes on this train, and like, they're coming for y'all. Like, listen, I don't want people getting shot on my car in the train. This is a big deal to me, so like, don't tell him I told you, but like, I told you. So James, he's like, well, that's a problem. So he starts hatching this plan. So basically they're gonna leave the train early on one of the stops. So like when they get to like Jacksonville, Florida, they're gonna stop, they're gonna get off the train, sneak off, and then they're gonna get on another train to St. Petersburg. So he and Solitaire do exactly that. And then like the next train to St. Petersburg isn't coming for a few hours. So they have to just like lay low for a few hours, and they kind of just go to like this little diner that I feel is obviously like a Waffle House. And James is just so disgusted by all the American food. And it's just like, yeah, you know what? At 4 a.m. at Waffle House, that's fair. Like, it's not good food. So anyway, it was just kind of funny seeing James Bond at Waffle House. So anyway, they wait it out and they get on the new train and they make it down to St. Petersburg. No problem. And then they get off the train, they go straight to the hotel to meet up with Felix. However, like I said, this train left several hours later, so it's been several hours. No one's heard from James. So James, he just walks up, knocks on the, like, you know, the hotel door, and Felix opens. He's like, oh my God! Like, overjoyed to see each other, because Felix was like, bro, we all thought you were like mega dead. Because like, I don't know when you got off the train, but apparently like the train got shot up by like machine guns, and then like they also threw a bomb in your compartment of the train and blew it up. Like, everyone thought you were like way dead. But nope, of course you're not dead. Here you are just waltzing in here like 3 hours later with this beautiful woman, like nothing's wrong. Fucking James. So Felix and James, they're like, all right, cool, we're both alive, let's get to work. They start comparing notes about the case, and they determine that Mr. Big's partner, someone called the Robber, is the same guy who manages this exotic fish shop called Ouroboros. So James and Felix, they decide they're gonna go over to the fish shop, they're gonna go take a look and see what's going on, and they're gonna leave Solitaire behind at the hotel. And Solitaire tells them, no, please don't leave me, because like, I have like psychic feelings that I'm in danger. And like, is she right? Probably, yeah. You know, Mr. Big has informants everywhere. They probably found them. But James is like, don't worry about it, babe. It'll be okay. We'll be right back. So they leave her at the hotel, and he and Felix go to the bait shop, and they meet the Robber. But like, they really get nothing out of this experience besides, you know, getting a shotgun pulled on them and being told to get. Like, this is the most like rednecky guy you've ever seen on page. So they're like, well, I guess we're gonna head on out. They're not gonna get anything out of this right now. They're like, all right, let's just go back to the hotel, we'll regroup. So they go back to the hotel. And what do you know? Solitaire has been kidnapped, like she said. James is very upset by this because like, he's very protective of Solitaire. Damsels in distress are like his weakness. And we do kind of see in his own like psyche and his thought process how like, you know, affable, nice James, who gets along with people and stuff, and is friends with Felix, start turning off. He starts going into assassin mode again, which is basically his default coping mechanism with things in life. I'm sure it has something to do with like PTSD perhaps, but we're not gonna get into that for now. But basically James is just going into like soldier mode, assassin mode, and he's just thinking about like how much fun he's gonna have like murdering these dudes who took Solitaire. Like, he's like, this is gonna be really fun, but you know what? To be at peak physical condition, I need to be rested. So he lays down and literally forces himself to sleep, just like, sleep. Because like, that is his fucking assassin brain. It's very other when you read it. It's not like a normal thought process. So it's the morning, James wakes up and he's like, okay, I'm ready to go get some bloody revenge. Let's go. So he goes out into like, I guess the living room of the suite they're in, and he finds this note from Felix. And Felix is like, listen, couldn't sleep. got kind of bored. I'm gonna go check out Ouroboros again, like the bait shop. And like, guess what? You know what? If I'm not back by 10 a.m., come find me. Like, that was his whole note. James is like, ah, fuck, like something bad's going on. I know it. So he's about to run out of the hotel when he gets a phone call, right? And it's a phone call with someone claiming to be from the hospital. And they're like, are you James? Guess what? There's your friend Felix. He was in a really bad car accident. You gotta come to the hospital. James is like, ah, shit, I knew it. So he goes to the hospital, like breakneck speed, and he gets there and he's like, where's Felix? And she's like, I don't know who the fuck you're talking about. Because like this was all like a ruse to get James out of the hotel room for a second. And he figures this out and he's like, oh, fuck. And so he gets back in the car and he like drives as fast as he can back over to the hotel. And he gets back to the room and he finds like this lump on Felix's bed covered in bloody bandages. Like the whole face, the arms, the body is all bloody bandages. And like there's like a little piece of paper sticking out of the mouth. So he's like, oh no, this is a bad day. And so he goes and like he picks the note out of the mouth because it's not moving. He doesn't know if this is alive or not or what is it. And he opens it and it says he disagreed with something that ate him. So James is like, oh no, this isn't just a lump of bloody rags. This is Felix. Uh-oh. So James, he's like, he calls the CIA and he's like, you motherfuckers need to get a doctor out here stat. So he is like upset and he kind of still goes deeper into assassin mode because now his friend is hurt. So he's like taking his pulse, trying to stop the bleeding, calling the CIA, saying, you gotta get a doctor out here right fucking now. So apparently what had happened was Felix went to Ouroboros and was ambushed, right? And to torture him, they literally fed him to a shark. And this particular scene actually isn't used in the movie Live and Let Die, but it is used in the movie License to Kill. So they brought it back to the 80s and they put it in a completely different film, but like it's a very iconic moment. So luckily for Felix, he's badly injured, like he has facial injuries and he's beat up a little bit. And he lost half of his leg and one of his arms, but he'll survive. So James, he takes that into account and he sits there and he just doesn't talk to anybody. And everyone's like really creeped out by it because he is so, you know, incandescently pissed off about this. Like they took his girl and they hurt his bestie. Like James is about to go full force assassin murder machine on all their asses. Like we see James's emotions turn off almost completely. Like he is devoid of any like emotions about stuff and he's just acting really robotically. He's in killer mode and it's really, really chilling to see James when he stops trying to be a person. Because like basically everyone's like, all right, you're acting weird. We're just gonna back away slow. And like James is like, okay. And he just sits there cleaning his gun for hours waiting for it to get dark. That's all he's doing is just cleaning his guns. Like, whoa. Like things got dark here for a minute. Well, now that it's dark, it's murder o'clock. And James, he's still in assassin mode. So he's like, okay, my body needs fuel to work at peak performance. So he goes to like whatever, you know, hotel restaurant there is. He orders like the biggest steak he can and eats it and drinks like 1/4 pint of bourbon and 2 coffees. Like perfect murder fuel. And he rolls over to Ouroboros and he sneaks in and he finds all these like fish tanks and stuff with like poisonous fish in them. And they already knew like Ouroboros, they like trap and like sell like rare tropical poisonous fish and stuff. So it's not unusual that those fish are there. So James manages to get his hand in one of the tanks with the poisonous fish unharmed and he like sticks it in the bottom of like the tank and he's like digging around and he pulls up, what do you know, a hidden gold coin. Like that's how they've been smuggling the coins into the country. by hiding them under deadly poisonous fish. Like, no one's gonna check. Like, you know, James reluctantly respects the hustle here. It's a pretty good idea. However, it's right about now that the robber shows up and he starts shooting at James. He's like, I'm gonna shoot first, ask questions later. And James, he's like, well, fuck. And he starts shooting back, and eventually James, out of bullets, what's he gonna do? So he needs to like think, he needs to be crafty. He needs to pull a fast one here. So James, he like pretends to be injured and he's gonna surrender to the robber. So he's like kind of slowly going out, and the robber's like, I'm gonna kill you. He's very excited about it. And he sees like the robber like kick a latch in the floor that goes directly under like the pier where the bait shop is to the sea. Like, this is where they keep the sharks they're gonna feed people to. So James, rightfully angry about this, and he's like, oh hell no. And he like springs his plan into action here, which is essentially just jump at the guy real fast and beat the snot out of him. It's not a very complex plan, but like it's very effective. So James, he's won the fight, and he pushes the robber into like the hatch on the floor. And as he's closing up the hatch, all he hears is like the thumps of the sharks and the gurgling of the guy as he's being ripped apart by sharks. Dear Lord, this book gets very dark at times. Now that James has got some revenge, he's feeling a little bit better, you know? He's got the revenge itch scratched for now. So James, he heads over to Jamaica, you know, to finish the mission and hopefully also be able to rescue Solitaire. James, he's on the plane, and honestly, he's having a terrible plane ride. And this happens several times in the James Bond books. He hates flying. Every time he gets in a plane, there's always really bad turbulence, and he's like, okay. Like, every time it's kind of very funny and like gallows humor. And he starts feeling himself get scared that the plane is gonna crash, but like his assassin brain kicks back on, and he basically just tells him, hey man, fuck it. There's nothing you can do about it. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are with a gun or like how good you are at your job, you can't fight a plane crash, you know? So you might as well relax and have a cigarette while you can. Mind you, James smokes like 2 packs a day at this point. Like, he is a chimney. So anyway, he's just sitting on a plane, there's turbulence, and he's smoking. And then eventually it evens out, and he's like, oh, well, nice. He's just like chilling on a plane. And the plane, it ends up landing safely, and he goes to meet his contact there, and it's this guy named Strangways. And Strangways, he kind of goes over the layout of Mr. Big's private island that he has in Jamaica, and he also puts him in contact with like a local guy who's going to be like his guide, whose name is Quarrel. So, side note here, these are both recurring characters that we see a couple times, especially when James is in Jamaica. Most famously, they're known from Dr. No. I won't give spoilers for Dr. No because we're not there yet, but they're both in that book. Anyway, we'll get to that. So Mr. Big's boat is going to arrive in Jamaica in about a week. So James, he has that amount of time to like start training for the mission and like going off with Quarrel, getting the lay of the land and like how best to do things in Jamaica. He's not used to Jamaica, he's from England. And it's like this whole like montage of like training. Also, good news here, James, he finally hears back from the hospital in Florida that Felix is officially awake and he's making jokes about his predicament. They're having the plastic surgeon see him, so they're going to be able to repair his whole face. And like, you know, he's in good spirits, and James is like very overjoyed, and we see one like the Grinch, his heart grow 3 sizes too big. Like, we just see like a little bit of like James's emotional state because Strangways is the one who gave him the message, and he's like, do you want me to tell him anything? And he's like, tell Felix I miss him. What are feelings? And he like just stops talking for a minute after that. He just moves the subject to another thing, but like he told someone to tell Felix that he misses him. So like Felix is one of his human connections in the world, and like I really like the one moment where he's like kind of vulnerable actually. So anyways, it's almost go time. The boat is almost to Jamaica, and this is the plan they have put in place. So James, he's gonna scuba dive over to Mr. Big's boat, and they're gonna plant a bunch of explosives on the boat, and then they're gonna blow it up. Like, again, not a really elaborate plan, but an effective one. So once the boat arrives in harbor, it's go time. James, he waits till it's like really dark out, it's full night. you know, he pops some Benzedrine and he slips on his scuba gear and goes after Mr. Big. So like, here's like a little like historical fact. Benzedrine was originally invented as like a decongestant, but primarily it was used as an amphetamine, especially in World War II, where James, you know, served. He served in World War II. He saw some action. So like, this is probably where he would have picked up the habit of like taking Benzedrine before like an important mission. So I just thought that was kind of like an interesting like little historical tidbit they threw in. So James, he's scuba diving, he's moving along. Things are going relatively smoothly. He's just kind of like in an underwater like fantasy land. He's like, oh, coral reefs and little fish and like, oh, that thing. Like he's just like la 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 under the sea. Like he's just having a good time. Although everything can't go super smoothly, there's got to be obstacles here. And like, I kid you not, James Bond gets into a fight with an octopus. Like, and honestly, James is losing for a little bit of this fight. Like, this is a very strong octopus. And I'm just going to say right now, it's not the last time James gets to a fight with an octopus. There are several octopus fights in the James Bond series. I don't know why. But anyway, James Bond, he fights an octopus. He ends up winning in the end. So he gets away and he gets to the boat and he manages to attach like all the explosives and he's like, all right, job well done. And then he turns around and he notices there's an ass load of barracudas and sharks and they're all going bananas. And he's like, oh no. Because apparently Mr. Big, he's chumming the water. So, you know, well, shit, James is in a pickle. So what had happened was when James was fighting the freaking octopus, he like blew a lot of air out of his mouth because he was surprised and the bubbles like caught someone's attention. So the freaking octopus gave him away. So that's why they're chumming the water. They're trying to get this guy killed. So James, he's like, uh-oh, no, gotta figure this out. So he's like trying to back away, but it's not really successful because like, guess what? James gets bit by a barracuda pretty badly. So he's like, oh, double shit. Oh no. So James, he's like, ah, I'm bleeding a lot. They're all going to come after me. So he finds this little like passage in this coral reef. And he's like, well, I'm going to just sneak on up in here because then probably they won't be able to get me if I'm in the reef. And he just keeps going deeper and deeper until he's like, like I've been going for a while. And he looks, and he finally like, you know, comes up to the surface of the water and he's like, I am in a pirate cave. Oh my gosh, I'm in a pirate cave, there's treasure. However, this is short-lived because he's also immediately captured by Mr. Big, who's literally just sitting there at a table in his pirate cave office, just like, oh, Mr. Bond, hello. Like, whoops. So Mr. Big, he has James brought up to like his lair and he throws him in a cell where he's been keeping solitaire. And since these two have been like nothing but trouble for Mr. Big, obviously, they both need to die. So Mr. Big, he's planning this elaborate death for them. Very supervillain antics here because he's gonna basically take James in solitaire. He's gonna tie them up to each other and then he's gonna drag them behind the boat until they get eaten by sharks. And also, this like sequence of getting drugged behind the boat and like allegedly eaten by sharks was like taken out of Live and Let Die and put into the film For Your Eyes Only. So this is another big action scene that they took out of here and put it in another movie because it was that good. But anyway, they lock him in the cell. They're like, all right, see you later when we tie you to the boat. So some time goes by. It's the next morning. They're getting ready to leave. They take James in solitaire out. They get him all tied up and they're like, tie him to the boat and they're off. They're getting drugged behind a boat. And James, he's trying to like look and like figure out like how the distance they are and like the speed. And he's trying to do math and stuff. He's like, oh fuck, this is bad. And so, and he also has to deal with Solitaire who's tied to him and he's trying to like protect her as best he can. And he sees that they're quickly being drugged toward a coral reef. And now the thing with coral reef is that they are incredibly sharp. So basically, they're going to get cut up on this coral reef and then have a bunch of blood everywhere, and that's going to attract the sharks. And James is like, ah, fuck, not the coral reef. And, you know, there's nothing James can do to stop this from happening, so he's just planning on, like, how to, like, save Solitaire. He's like, okay, I'll angle it so my body, like, takes the brunt of the damage from the coral reef, and it's my skin getting flayed off, and then hopefully she'll be okay. And, like, it's really, really tensely written, honestly. I'm not doing it justice, but the way James is thinking, watching this coral reef get increasingly closer to him, knowing he's about to suffer, is really tensely written when you read it. So as James is like bracing himself for the coral reef, the sky goes white and there's this huge explosion. Turns out James got saved from yet another explosion by nature. Like in Casino Royale, it was a tree that protected him from a bomb. In this one, the reef he was so scared of actually took like the brunt of the percussive force. So James is like, oh, I guess I'm okay. Yay! So he's able to like tread water enough to like drag himself in like solitaire over to the coral reef because there's nothing else around for them to like sit on. So he's like, well, shit. he did all this to avoid the reef only to have to get on the reef. So he gets up on there, he's dragging solitaire and his body, he's getting all cut up on this reef. And but I mean, he's safe for now because, you know, he's on a reef and the sharks can't swim into the reef. So even if he is bleeding, he's relatively safe. However, mind you, this was a boat explosion. A lot of people are injured and in the water and bleeding. So, oh boy, lots of sharks start coming over and the barracudas. They're all having a breakfast buffet. And it is gruesomely written. Like just full on jaws up in here. Just seeing people like get whoosh, like sucked down by sharks and like James is having to watch all this and it's horrifying. And like James is like kind of fucked up by it. He's like, oh God, like I didn't know I was gonna watch sharks eat people today. And then like James, you know, he's just on the reef, like trying not to get eaten by sharks himself. And then he sees a figure trying to swim and he realizes it's Mr. Big. He has survived the boat explosion. And he's trying to swim for the coral reef too to like get to safety. But before he can get there, the barracudas descend on him and just start eating him alive in a feeding frenzy. And James is watching this and it is gross. This like shredded. Like, oh my gosh, barracuda attack. And James like, ah! And then, you know, just to top things off, after, you know, the barracudas have had their way with him, like his head just, a leopard shark comes along and just eats his head. A big old whoosh, crunch of his head that's like gruesomely described. And James is like, oh no. Luckily, Solitaire had passed out, but James is like, oh God, like, I can't unsee this. And then luckily, James starts hearing something very wonderful, and it's Quarrel's voice, his island guide. And he's out like on like a little boat, and he's calling out to him like, hey James, do you need rescuing? Like, maybe I can rescue you? And James is so happy. He's like, oh my God, Quarrel, you son of a bitch, I love you. Like, he's very happy to see Quarrel right now. He's rescued. He's saved it. He's like, well, this worked out. He didn't really have a lot of hope for his plan, and it ended up working. And honestly, all of this, like, horror he just watched, like barracudas and sharks eat people, was actually really traumatizing for him because he's laying on this thing and he saw all this carnage. Mind you, he was in war and this was a lot for him too. And like when he hears Quarrel's voice, like there is a line in the book where he's like, I cried the first tears I have since I was a boy. Like that's how happy he was that someone was coming to save him. Because it was pretty fucking hopeless. So like, wow, like this was bad even for James. So Quarrel, he gets him into like his canoe and he rows him over to the back to the mainland. And James is actually kind of like really sweet right now. He's like goes into human mode immediately. Like he's out of assassin mode into human mode. And he's like being really sweet and like protective. And he's trying to take care of Solitaire. And he like really wants her to be okay. So he like takes her in and he helps her like clean up all of her wounds and bathe and get all the dirt off her and stuff. And like he's tucking her into bed and making sure she's okay and sleeping. And then Strangways and Quarrel have to come to get James. And like, James, you are bleeding from everywhere and a friggin' barracuda took a bite out of your shoulder. You need to go to the hospital. Go to the damn hospital, James. Like they have to talk sense into him. Now that Solitaire is safe and like tucked in and she's resting and James has protected her, he's like, all right, I guess I'll go to the hospital. So take him to the hospital. He gets patched up and stuff. Mind you, like he got really injured. So like they have to patch a lot of stuff up. But anyway, the day is kind of saved. James is all right. He makes his report to M from the hospital and like M responds back telling him like, hey James, you did a good job. Like, good job, man. You can have 2 weeks of passionate leave. Wink, wink. You know, with Solitaire, wink, wink. It's like a very conspicuous phrasing of that sentence. So James, he's like, nice, boss. And so James, he goes back to solitaire, and then he kind of just, you know, is recouping on a beach with like a drink and a hot girl, and like he's hanging out with Quarrel, his buddy, and he's just like chilling, like having a nice like vacation in Jamaica. And you know, he and like Solitaire are still kind of like really flirty and stuff, and they're like, basically both of them are super android, so they're like trying to get creative with what sexual positions they could still do with each other. So they're, you know, they don't like outright say them, but they're kind of trying to figure it out, because you know, James is really like physically hurt everywhere, and then Solitaire's back is really cut up, so like, how's this gonna work? And then this kind of fades to black, and that's the end of the book. So of course they're going out and like, how do we figure out how to fuck? So anyway, that was Live and Let Die. Like I said, it's a big yikes for racism. I told the plot without getting into a lot of the very racist things in here, but just know, yikes, there's a lot. But the plot itself is good. It's just there's a lot of really problematic content along with it. But it has some of the most amazing action sequences in the whole series. It's very gruesome at times and very dark at times. And it does show a bit of like James' like coping mechanisms, where he goes into assassin brain, into person brain. It shows like a little bit of it, but like this one is less a moody book about feelings and more like spy adventure. James has further moody books about feelings in the future. This one is a bit more like adventure based. So not a lot of character development for James, but it was interesting to still see that dynamic at play. So overall, this is not my favorite of the James Bond books, just because the yikes factor is super high. And I mean, it's very action packed, but like I'm reading it because I'm interested in James as a character and like seeing all that growth. And there wasn't really a ton of it in this book. So I don't know. I think I gave it like 3 stars, just because like the yikes factor is high. Like it can't get 5, period. And then like there wasn't a lot of character growth. So like I think 3.25 max is like my rating for it. Anyway, let me know in the comments down below, what's your favorite James Bond book if you've read them all? Or are you kind of interested in knowing like which parts go into which films? Because this one in particular is cut up among many films in the series, so it's kind of an interesting read. Yeah, let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. Also, if you want cool exclusive content, including early access to videos and a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron. Links for that are in the description down below. And on that note, I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.